All right, guys, so moving on further into our trig ratios, besides sine, the next one that we can use is something called cosine. And the ratio of cosine is going to be adjacent over hypotenuse. So just like sine earlier, we did opposite over hypotenuse. But now with cosine, we're going to use the adjacent over hypotenuse. So if we were to analyze this right triangle over here, remember, we do not ever use these ratios using the right angle. It's always going to be the other angles that are given within this right triangle. So right now, let's just say that we wanted to find the cosine of C here. So let's look at everything going from angle C here. So the cosine of C is going to be equal to, we know it's adjacent over hypotenuse. So let's go ahead and look at everything and determine what the sides are. So if I look here at C, I always know the side directly across from C would always be your opposite side, correct? The side opposite of the right angle is always going to be your hypotenuse. So if that's the hypotenuse and that's the opposite side, the only side left is going to be your adjacent side, right next to angle C. So right now, ladies and gentlemen, if I wanted to use cosine, I would do adjacent over hypotenuse. So from C, the adjacent side would be Z. So I'd put Z on top if I knew that number. And the hypotenuse, of course, is going to be Y. So if I wanted to use the cosine of C, if I wanted to find angle C or I needed to find a missing measurement, this is the ratio I would use, okay? Or if I wanted to, I could look at this from angle A. So let's hypothetically think if I knew what angle A was, or if I wanted to find angle A, I could do the same type of measurement with cosine here. So let me go and erase this, and let's look at the cosine of A. So looking at it from cosine of A, so we're looking from angle A. So again, I'm going to analyze everything again. So opposite of A, all the way across from angle A. If I drew an arrow, this would be the opposite of A. Always opposite of the right angle will always be your hypotenuse. That's never going to change, okay? And then the only side left would be the adjacent side. So if I wanted to do the cosine of A, I would do adjacent over hypotenuse. So the adjacent side would be X from A, and the hypotenuse would be Y. So this would be the ratio that I would use to help me to solve for angles or to help me to solve for a missing side using cosine. All right, guys, so here's your examples for your cosine ratio that we're going to use here. So right now, same example we kind of used in sine, but we're doing it differently, trying to find the height of the flagpole again, looking at this example. Okay, so right now, let's say we're trying to find the height of the flagpole, and we are given the angle 35 degrees. So we're going to be looking at everything from that angle 35. Because remember, this is 90 degrees, but we're not ever going to look at anything from that 90-degree angle. We're only going to look at it from the other two. So they have given us this angle. So right now, looking from angle 35, if I go all the way across, this of course is going to be my opposite side. Opposite of the right angle is always going to be your hypotenuse. And then besides the other two, the only one left is going to be your adjacent side. And that is actually what I want to find. I want to find that adjacent side. So look here, ladies and gentlemen. From angle 35, I need to find the adjacent side, and I'm given the hypotenuse. So adjacent, hypotenuse, that matches my cosine ratio. So I'm going to use cosine. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to do the cosine is going to be equal to adjacent over hypotenuse. Okay? And what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to put 35 next to cosine. So it's going to become cosine of 35 is equal to, and look, opposite, no, we're not using opposite, we're using adjacent and hypotenuse. So my adjacent goes on top, so x, and my hypotenuse goes on bottom. Okay? And so now we're doing the same thing we did earlier pretty much. X divided by 20. So I'm going to get x by itself. So the opposite of dividing by 20 is going to be multiplying by 20. So I'm going to multiply by 20 on both sides. I'm going to kind of break this here so I can get on both sides. So I'm going to multiply by 20 on both sides. So I'm actually going to put it right here. I know it's kind of bunched up, but we can see it, okay? So what I'm going to do is this is actually going to cancel. So I'm going to be left with x on this side. And then remember, in the calculator, this is what you're actually going to type in. You're going to go to your trig function, which is under your control, and you're going to do the cosine of 35, and it's going to be parentheses, and then you're going to multiply that by 20. Okay, and so let me go ahead and do that in my calculator real quick. So trig, I'm going to go to cosine, and I'm going to type in 35, and I'm going to times that by 20, and what you're going to end up getting is 16.38 if you're rounding to the hundredths place. So right now, the height of the flagpole is actually going to be 16.38 feet if we were doing it in feet here. So that's how you would use the cosine ratio to help you to find a side. So now we're going to come over here, and we're actually going to do an example where we're using the cosine ratio to help me to find an angle. So we're using the opposite of that, which is going to be the inverse of cosine, which we did earlier. So cosine to the -1 up there. So that should be inside your trig ratio function. So here we go. So right now I'm trying to find angle x here. So first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to recognize my hypotenuse, my opposite side, and my adjacent side here. So I know opposite of my angle is always going to be the opposite side. Opposite of my right angle is always going to be the hypotenuse. And then hypotenuse and opposite, the only other side left is going to be my adjacent side. So now I know, since I know my adjacent side, I know my hypotenuse, adjacent hypotenuse matches the cosine ratio. So I can use the cosine ratio to help me to find the measurement of angle x. So the cosine of x is going to be equal to adjacent, which is 10, over hypotenuse, which is 27. And so now what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to take this, and I have my calculator. To find this angle, I'm going to do cosine -1, and in the parentheses, I'm going to do 10 over 27. Okay? So in my calculator, you're going to go to the trig function, cosine to the -1, and you'll be given parentheses. And in those parentheses, you're going to do 10 over 27. And when you click enter, the measurement of angle x is going to be 68.26 degrees. So ladies and gentlemen, that would be the measurement of angle x. So ladies and gentlemen, an example on how to solve for a side, an example on how to find a missing angle measurement using the cosine ratio.